I opened the Warrant and Finance meeting of June 12th, 2013. It is now 6:34 p.m. About as on time as we tend to be, which isn't very. And first item up on the agenda is approval. So looking for a motion for that. Oh, excuse me, roll call. We have 4 members here, so we have an official meeting and we can do business. Moving on to approval of the agenda.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda.
I second it.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as written, I presume. Is there any discussion about what's on here, or anything more to discuss? All in favor of the motion to approve as written, so signify. Thank you. Okay, approval of minutes. What we have this evening, pretty much the only thing we have on our docket this evening is approval of 4 sets of minutes that cover the 4 meetings as opposed to workshops that we held during this past budget season. The first one up is September 10th, 2012. That is our first meeting, and also it was our review of the special town meeting warrant, given that just a couple days later we ended up having to have our meeting for making those recommendations. So it was a dual purpose meeting, September 10, 2012. And I don't know if you've got an opportunity to look at these previously or not, but take whatever time you need to review. And I did reconfirm this afternoon that on item C, the last meeting from the previous year that we held for this purpose to approve a couple sets of minutes was on June 4th, 2012. So that's what we were talking about at the time.
I'll make a motion that we approve the September 10th, 2012 meeting minutes as written.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the September 10th, 2012 meeting minutes as written. Any further discussion? Any quibbles or additions or any of that stuff? One thing I'll point out, Dennis, you probably have the only good copy of this. This afternoon when I printed off these 3 extra copies, I managed to print off the ones before before I fixed a couple typos days ago. So I still had some old copies lying around. So in new business, distributed copies of draft special town meeting. There's an extra letter there, and at the bottom of the first page, York County spelled incorrectly.
Yeah.
So I've circled those 2 items.
Yep.
I am reasonably sure that Dennis's copy doesn't have those, and it was only after I printed these things off that.
We'll forgive you, Paul.
What are you gonna do?
Obviously, you can understand, even if it's misspelled, you know what it means.
Sure, but perfection is an elusive thing, but it doesn't hurt to strive.
Of course, it might be a little less in your paycheck for doing this,
I'll give you a quarter. Any further discussion? Hearing none. It's been moved and seconded to approve September 10, 2012 meeting minutes as written or in specific as corrected because there were those 2 typos. All in favor, so signify. Thank you. Moving on, September 13th, 2012, recommendations for special town meeting warrant, and that was the one where we were talking about law enforcement service and fire truck purchase. And given that this was an official, the first one, I had actually prepared the minutes for that. This one, given that it was an official recommendation meeting, that was done by Lorraine, the Board of Selectmen's secretary, whom we share on occasion. And when you're ready, I'll entertain a motion. For the record, I've pretty much read these until I'm blue in the face, and I'm reasonably convinced that despite the human error factor, they are correct.
I'll make a motion that we set the September 13th, 2012 minutes as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the September 13, 2012 meeting minutes as written. Any further discussion? So, all in favor of the motion, so signify. Thank you. 4-0. Okay, third of four is on April 2, 2013, so now we're getting into a little more contemporary times. Recommendations for the 2013 school meeting warrants. And if you're interested on this one, I do have because this one actually talks about dollar amounts and article numbers and such. If you're interested in looking at the numbers, that's the actual warrant that I was looking at that evening. And again, I'm reasonably satisfied that the numbers are reflective of the document that we were considering.
They never did put that other warrant article forward, did they, Paul?
What article is that?
Remember there was one that was gonna put forward for, when the double was at 4, and they decided they said something about putting it on.
You talking about zoning?
The June town meeting, no, the school.
What was that, then, like an extra 10,000
Or
to
something.
go into something or other?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it never materialized. Yeah, that was on the early budget, and then they dropped it,
Yeah.
and then it was gonna potentially
And
be
then we'll
moved.
bring it up
Yeah,
again, and they didn't.
and I think the rationale for that was gonna be just, certainly one of them is if the budget was voted down, that would not be affected. It would just be a separate thing, but. No, it went away and it didn't come back, so not the worst thing in the world.
I'll make a motion that we accept the Warrant and Finance Committee meeting as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve/accept the April 2nd, 2013 Warrant and Finance Committee meeting minutes as written. Is there any further discussion, or is there any discussion period? Take your time. You all set on it? Okay. You gents all set as well?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, so signify. Thank you. 4-0. Final one would be May 21, 2013. A little bit back, recommendations for the town warrant, town meeting warrant. This one has 41 articles on it. And I got this one. I believe, in my opinion. Yeah. There. I don't necessarily, I'm reasonably sure that all the wording and all the article numbers and all that is correct, but I guess the thing to most focus on would be the votes that it stated, because that's really what's going to be coming up at, be reflected on the current warrant. That is going to appear at town meeting on Saturday. I'm sure we're keeping home viewers on the edge of their seats.
Yeah.
May the excitement never end.
I'll make a motion that he accept the minutes. May 22nd,
22nd?
2013, on the 21st, 2013. As written.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 21st, 2013, from the Warrant and Finance Committee meeting on that date. Any further discussion, or any discussion at all?
I still am uncomfortable, even though I voted for it, with the word moved, put down to the stockpile with a $2 per cubic yard moved. And
Yeah,
I was really hoping that word, when the selectmen, put the warrant through, that they would omit that word. So, there's a good chance I'm probably gonna ask the town meeting for the meeting.
Where is that, Dennis? What article?
so that would be
Yeah.
Article 24. Well,
And my reason is, and I'm not saying that anybody's done anything wrong, or
Yeah.
they're doing everything legit, they have that. However, if somebody decided that they were gonna go by that, the townspeople voting to pay them $2 a yard for material moved, that means they could, in fact, charge legitimately, when they put in 4,000 yards of dirt, charge $2 a yard for putting it in, and $2 a yard for taking it out.
well, okay, so looking at, that's basically a subcat, or a detail of an item that says loading at stockpile.
You know?
So theoretically, unless you're loading at the stockpile, that item does not apply.
Unless you're loading it into the building.
Okay, so if you remove that, you could still say, oh, I'm loading it into the building, I got rid of the word moved, and I'm getting $2 per yard. I mean,
It should read loading trucks.
Ah,
I see what you're saying, just when they're loading trucks for
Yeah.
going out on the.
You know? That's how it used to
so
be.
loading
Well, what-
trucks
but they're not
at
doing- They're
stockpile?
not using it for anything else but that, right?
No, no.
$2 a yard, I mean, they're not.
No, they're not. You know, stock and data knew what to do, but say if the way this is voted in, and I was the next road commissioner, and I go down there, Holly, I could say, no, I'm not gonna work for the hour rate. I'm gonna work for that $2 a yard, putting it in the building. So I'm loading it.
Okay, so rather than getting rid of the word
So-
moved, you would probably want to say loading trucks at stockpile.
Something, like, I mean, whatever.
Just to secure that it's for that reason.
That it's coming out, not going
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
And like I say, I'm not saying anybody's doing anything.
No, because I know they're not.
It's just,
Yeah,
you know,
well, okay.
when you, it's kind of like you, Paul, going over some of the wording and the ordinances and stuff like that. It doesn't mean the intent is wrong,
Right,
it's
it's
just
how it's executed.
clearing things up.
Sure.
And
Well, certainly if you bring it up at town meeting, that will be part of the, when you have a motion,
Sure.
that will be part of the discussion, that will make it on the permanent warrant that goes up on our website,
Right.
and that's what will be used for next year's discussions. So that's gonna be the high, even if it's voted down, that will be the highest likelihood that it will be considered next year during the budget season.
I mean, I would just like to think that everything that we do is hopefully an improvement on what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And
Incremental moves forward.
so that everything's very clear, and the worst problem in government is gray areas,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, as far as I'm concerned. But I agree with the whole warrant, I just don't
Yeah.
agree with that.
And on that note, there's discussion afoot lately for Article 41, see the two unknowns there, that in all likelihood, there will be a motion from the floor to put some numbers
Put
on
it,
it.
put
This
the
one, the
number.
one that I have at home, Dennis, just says per cubic yard, it doesn't even say moved on it,
It never did, Holly. It always said, just like you said.
per cubic yard. It doesn't say new, I mean, yeah.
Where,
That's new.
where,
When-
No, it's not new, it's at least a couple years old. And I don't have my materials here in front of me, so what's that?
where are
It
the?
very well.
The move thing is 24.
I didn't notice it, but I know that.
Yeah, because I almost think the one I had at home, the most recent one,
There,
that looks
stockpile.
strange to me.
Oh.
That doesn't look like the one I look at. I look
Now-
at the one that says per cubic yard.
If it was on the warrant the last couple of years,
Then it
it
should say
said that.
moved, yeah.
Yeah. Now, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I think my first year, we had a whole bunch of discussions about all of that. And, you know, a lot of typos about cubit versus cubic.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's a lot of shuffling around, but that was a couple of years ago, so. it really was
Loading
less-
at stockpile, $2 per cubic yard move, should be loading the sand trucks.
Especially loading trucks.
Right.
And that's why it's always better is you get so much you got for loading the trucks.
But my point is that
And as far as I know, that's all that we've ever
Well,
used
yeah.
that for, is just.
when they
removing.
truck the sand in,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's for
that's,
delivery.
putting it in the sand and salt shed is included in the price they charge, is it?
No,
No, it's per hour, they get per hour
They get
then.
per hour then.
Yeah, they get per hour then.
usually what happens, and I was thinking anyway, what happens is usually Scott and David both use their loaders down there. And one guy's putting salt in and another guy is pushing all the dirt.
Pushing the
Yeah,
sand that
they
they
usually
dump.
share it, somebody's, yeah.
So that's where you get into the other items where so much per hour for this
Right.
kind of equipment or that kind of equipment. Yeah, and certainly, I absolutely have no quarrel with making it more specific according to the intent of that line.
Will you support that at town meeting hall?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I think that that's what it's supposed to be for.
Yeah, it's intent.
And I think the more we clarify things, the better off we are as a town.
Because if the guys use their loaders per hour, for example, loading trucks, they lose their shirt.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Because you're there
$2 an hour.
5 minutes,
I was gonna say,
5 minutes loading up a truck.
$2 an hour wouldn't even cover the fuel.
Okay.
So even if they use the loader rates, the most they're gonna run that loader is a half hour for a whole storm. And that wouldn't even pay with the fuel.
Yeah, right.
So we'll see what we see on Saturday, but that certainly makes good sense. So we've done a little bit of field here, but returning to the motion on the floor, which is to approve these minutes, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes of May 21, 2013 Warrant and Finance Committee meeting, so signify. Thank you. 4-0. No unfinished business, no new business, no public questions, comments, no other business. Next meeting.
I have a little bit before we finish up.
Sure.
If you don't mind. Somehow, and I don't know how to get there. Somehow, we need to find a way to depersonalize the efforts made by people in town government. So what I would like to see is, I mean, it used to be that the Warrant and Finance Committee was a committee that everybody looked up to, and the Warrant and Finance Committee kept all the departments in line. And it wasn't too often that whatever the Warrant and Finance Committee said is how the people voted. You know, they really were very influential, and somehow, a few years back, it all ended up into a cat fight. And I'm talking to all three of you, I guess. And I'd like to try to figure out some way, as a member of the Warrant and Finance Committee, to get back to that again, so that when you ask questions as a member of the Warrant and Finance Committee, or make a recommendation of the Warrant and Finance Committee, for people to understand that it's not a personal agenda.
Right.
It's It's just like our conversation about, the yards moved, you know? Me saying that, it could be construed, and some people would do this, that I'm accusing Scott or David of, cheating the town. And that is the farthest thing in my mind. And I would like to see some kind of unity with the Warrant and Finance Committee, and not saying we have to agree on everything during the meetings, and have heated discussions. If we have them, we have them. But I'd like to see the Warrant and Finance Committee somehow get back to where it used to be a very influential committee. And it seems to me, I notice a lot, like with the school, they answer your questions, but you're really not considered seriously, I don't believe. That's the way I feel. And I don't know what you guys think about it, or what you guys think you could do, or we need to do to turn this thing around. Paul, I give you all the credit in the world. You work very, very hard on this committee, and you're probably the best chairman that I've ever seen. If anybody says that Paul doesn't research what he's talking about, they're crazy. I think you do a great job. I don't know what the answer is or how to get there. Maybe we just need some new faces somehow.
One of the things that bothered me this year, and I already made how I felt known to school, which, and she's resigning and they're now looking for somebody else. They should start the day school starts to negotiate with the teachers, the aides, the bus company. Those contracts should be settled long before we have our first meeting. It's ridiculous. How do you, as a Warrant and Finance Committee member, determine what is best for the school and the town when those three things, they don't have any figures? It's just as bad as Article 41, put an unknown in. It's ridiculous.
And it is, I mean, you're right, it's just like a waste of our time, because nobody knows what the dollar amount is anymore.
Yeah.
Getting back to your primary point, is certainly several years ago, okay, so this is my third year on the committee. It's still a learning experience, you know, it's, in a lot of ways, what happens on this committee is very similar to what you were talking about earlier in the meeting, which is, you know, incremental improvement, you know, trying to go in the right direction. Certainly, I think we do try to keep personality out of it. I can think of one or two times during the course of this year where we perhaps slid a little close to the line, but I don't necessarily think we went over it. But, you know, just the facts, ma'am, you know, here's the opinion. And as far as, you know, the town body voting the way that the committee does, I do feel that we are a microcosm of the community. For that reason, I certainly don't want everyone on the committee to agree with each other.
Right.
We serve best when we have as many opinions as the people in the town have. So that when I, you know, and now I'm going back a few years when I would go to town meeting, I had not attended any workshops. Town meeting was it. You know, I feel like, you know, at the time at least, I felt I was really doing my duty by going to town meeting and voting. You know, I didn't really know much about workshops. And I found it very valuable to look at the warrant and see what the Warrant and Finance Committee voted. And if it was unanimous, okay, there's a pretty good chance I can vote for this and not be doing something stupid. If it was not unanimous, that's when I expected an explanation. That's when I wanted to know, okay, it's not a done deal. Let's find out what's going on. Why was it not unanimous? And that's when the best discussions come up. And a couple of times in the last couple of years, I have deliberately voted against the majority, not because I necessarily thought that I didn't like this article, but more because I wanted to stimulate discussion on town floor. Because, at least in my mind, that's the trigger.
It's people thinking.
It should get people thinking. Our power, if you want to call it that, is no more so than the guy at the water cooler that you say, hey, what do you think about this? And they say blah, 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 blah. That's it. We have no binding power, it's all advisory.
Right, no, I agree with that.
But certainly it's an informed advice. We do take the time to try to find out the underlying facts, try to make sure it's as correct as possible. We're not lawyers, we're not, high-powered advisors, consultants. We're just the folks in town who care about what happens, try to do a decent job, try to pay attention, and try to engage. That's it. That said, yes, a couple of years back, there was a bit of a, shall we say, decrease in the reputation of Warrant and Finance. I think we've gone in the right direction since then. I'm not too crazy about the fact that we have a hard time maintaining staffing, but I think that's true of a number of committees in town.
Yeah.
Almost every committee.
I'd certainly like to see more community involvement in this. Certainly the only thing that is required of this committee is to attend meetings and workshops is a real plus, and to engage. What your politics are, what your opinions are, is almost superfluous. Just the fact that you carefully consider these things and express your opinion, and not be afraid to do so. That said, obviously you can't demand or legislate respect. You have to earn it. And all I can hope is that over time, maybe now, maybe next year, maybe the year after, we will be earning that respect back. It's kind of hard to, have a business and have customers and fail those customers and earn that back. It's much easier to keep it in the first place than earning it back later. And we're kind of in that position, I think, through no fault of ours necessarily, because I don't think any of us were around at that particular juncture. But I don't necessarily think there's anything that we need to change in order to go in the direction that you're talking about. Is there something that we're not doing that we should be doing?
I don't know, Paul. I don't know. Maybe personally, Holly has an opinion.
Are there times when we haven't taken the highest road that we could? To the point where it's a habit and it needs to be changed. Perturbations occur, all the time. I guess the question is, what is our default behavior? Is our default behavior to take the high road, to assume the best, to try to not put personalities into it, but try to work to the optimal conclusion for the town? I think that's really what our goal should be, and I'm reasonably sure that it is most of the time.
Yeah.
And the only issue that I tend to see really is just one of staffing. That's my biggest issue for the third year in a row, trying to maintain, staffing for the meetings that sometimes we don't have a whole lot of choice about when those meetings are gonna be, and trying to get the people to be there to have quorum, to have 4 members to vote. So that's, and I'm gonna be speaking on that a little bit at town meeting about the new staff that's gonna be coming on at town meeting and what the requirements are for that, hopefully. And it's not a demand, just a request of the town that, that basically people be at the meeting in order to be considered, and that they express an interest. I don't think that's a lot to ask. And that way, hopefully, we'll be able to get through our year with a reasonable amount of staffing and not putting that much of a burden on the folks that are left to try to hold the ship.
I had a conversation with a businessman that lives here, actually. he admitted that in the 30 years he's been here, he has never once been to town meeting. And my comment was, if that's the case, if you don't like what went on, you have no right to bitch. Because you could go to town meeting, or you could go to the public hearing. And then I said to him, why don't you run for selectman? And he said, you think I got rocks in my head? He said, the last thing I would do would be involved as a selectman. He said, I just don't have the time or the interest to put up with the bullshit.
Well, what about other committees?
I don't know, but my point is, seems like it gets harder and harder to find people to serve on any committee.
Right.
Well, I can say that for me personally, when my kids were younger, it was more difficult for me. And with my husband actually having an elected position where he does get paid, I feel like it's kind of a good responsibility for me to try to make an effort to be on some committees and give back a little bit to the town, since Scott is
But
an
I
employee
know-
of the town.
I know that Warrant and Finance is not the only committee
No.
that's having problems filing.
And now, for me personally, I have a little bit more time to do that because my kids are older.
Yeah.
So I'm, trying to make that effort. But, you go in and when you haven't had the experience ever, it's all new. So yeah, I'm quieter and I don't know. I learned a lot this year, but that's how you're gonna get new people. They're gonna be green and they're not going to know everything that
Well,
everybody else is knowing.
both of your terms are up
Yeah.
this, in
Yeah.
several days.
Yep.
I thank you for serving, and I hope that we find some folks at town meeting who will be willing to participate. No experience required,
Right.
on-the-job training, and, just a bit of diligence really is
Yeah.
all that is required.
And actually, that was a big thing that I learned, because I had missed some of the workshops. And I learned through that a lot of the little stuff that you discuss is discussed in the workshop.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't miss those workshops, because then you're behind the 8 ball.
Well,
I learned that this year.
That's one of the reasons I am not going to run again. I missed some meetings this year because of health
Yeah,
problems.
yeah.
And I am not, they're still evaluating what they're gonna do next. So I just decided I don't,
Yeah, you don't
I'm
have
not,
the
I'm
time.
not doing the job
Right,
to the best of my ability if I don't make the meetings.
Well, I certainly know from firsthand experience that it does nothing incredibly good to one's health. And if you're
Yeah.
not optimal in the first place, it's not a good thing. So I certainly applaud your decision to think of your health
It's kind of scary now.
and do what you need to do.
They've been changing my medication, and they're talking about whether they're gonna put in a pacemaker, and they're talking about whether they're gonna go in through my heart and zap, see if they can control my heart rate, and I just don't need, and it's not fair to the town. If you don't make the meetings, and that's why I say that there should be some way, either selectman or the chairman of the committee or what, if you have somebody who is a member and he misses 3 or more meetings without a valid excuse, he doesn't belong on the committee.
no, that's the big thing, and I think that's what will make the difference. If someone's actually there and they take on the responsibility, then they know that they're willing to do it.
I think we need new faces.
Yeah.
Well, according to the current ordinance, that was put in place a couple of years in 2011, we have 6 standing members, we have 2 alternate members. We should, in an ideal world, be able to keep, to elect and maintain 8 members throughout the year, so we only need 4 to vote. So we have there's a couple who cannot attend this workshop or that meeting, there should not be a huge issue with it. And
Right.
unfortunately, there is, because we don't have that many people that actually can attend meetings and workshops. So, I certainly encourage, the folks who are gonna be at town meeting to consider being on one or more committees. Obviously, I have a vested interest in if somebody would be willing to go to the Warrant and Finance Committee, but I say this on behalf of other committees as well, who are always, at the selectmen's meeting, mentioned as meeting members. I think Planning Committee, what is that? Policy Committee, I know the Mary Grant Committee has been looking for members. So, certainly is not limited to one, and it'd be really great if the selectmen could maintain a pool of eligible, willing people who could be appointed as these situations come up during the course of the year.
I mean, normally at town meeting, you've got half a dozen different names that are brought up every year.
Right.
And it's the same names every year.
It's not so much the people who are stepping forward, it's the ones who are declining to step back,
Right.
who,
The other problem is it's rained all week, or the rain all week, and Saturday was supposed to be sunny.
Yeah,
You'd be lucky to have 50 people show up for town
that's
meeting.
true.
We're lucky anyway, of course.
so, we'll see what we see, but hopefully we can, beat back
But
a
we'll
sense
see.
of apathy.
We'll see at town meeting when I make a motion to change the wording there, and Holly gets up and supports it. We'll see, maybe both of us will get booed out.
Thanks, Dennis.
Either somebody will have a heart attack or something and say, what's going on? Oh, Dennis agreed once.
You're gonna make me get up and do it?
Well, you don't have
Well, we have in writing numerous times where you have agreed just in this
to. That's true.
budget year, so,
I mean, I hate the awful that I have to run for selectmen again just to get people out of here,
Oh, they will.
get involved.
Actually,
Oh, my God.
they had a pretty good turnout yesterday.
yes, over 500 voters.
I was very
Yesterday's
surprised.
With that
yesterday's
rain, I was very
referendum.
surprised.
So that was
Wow.
excellent.
That was great.
500 voters out of 2,100.
I know,
Well, it is significantly better than 50 or 70.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Wait till after Saturday morning.
They still never drawn up the voters that I did, even though I lost.
Can adjourn?
So have we beat this one to death? Are we ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay. Final item, next to the final item, the penultimate item. We have no further Warrant and Finance Committee meetings that will be held this season, to which I say hallelujah. And the annual town meeting will be held this coming Saturday, June 15th, beginning at 9 a.m. at Acton Elementary School gym. And a copy of the warrant is available at www.actonmaine.org. So you can just download a copy right off the web and take a look at what you'll be seeing. And no doubt there'll be some additional materials that you'll be able to see at the meeting, but that will be the warrant itself. Final item, adjournment. Looking for a motion on that.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn this meeting. Is there any discussion? All in favor, so signify. Thank you, 4-0. Adjourned at 7:18.
Thank you. See you, everybody.
Thank you
on
all.
Saturday.